Hello, everyone, and welcome to RHAP's coverage of Australian Survivor for Australia v World. I'm your host, Shannon Guss, here for episode 3. We got through week 1, 3 of 10 episodes. I demand more. I demand not to be 30% of the way through the season. It's physically painful, but let's talk about some happier things like the episodes, more fun Survivor with one of my favorite people in the whole world. It is a great Mike Bloom. Mike, thank you for being here.
Oh my god. Anytime. I know that you usually do the blank to my blank intros when we're on the pod together, so I was waiting to
Right.
hear the
Oh
box
my
to my
God.
key or vice versa.
It's been a long day, but I mean, the sorority to my Lisa, because I love you so much and I'd give you a kidney and I'd die for you.
Listen, vice versa as well. So that's the true testament of friendship, people. Find your person who could be the Suri in your life. What a fantastic celebration. I mean, listen, we are releasing this podcast on the day of my 36th birthday. And look,
Yeah.
I'm never somebody to do the whole birthday week, birthday month thing. All the power to those who do. I just, grew up in a certain mindset that I didn't think anyone should be celebrating me on a day, let alone an entire week. But I will say this is very much pushing against my own mindset, considering that we got an incredible week to start off this season. And not to say expectations were too low here, Shannon, but I think, looking at the short number of days, it's always difficult to think about what a cast chemistry is going to be on paper versus in person. But this has exceeded every single thing I thought going into the season. Even the people that were like saying this is going to be one of the best seasons ever, I'm like, listen, I saw Australian Survivor All-Stars, started off strong, had us in the first half, not going to lie. But, and again, we could get bit in the butt here, but God, just what a sublime way to celebrate this show. And look, it is still going the route of a lot of these All-Star seasons where we have lost 3 incredibly big players, 2 of them from a physical perspective, especially in getting rid of 2 of the, most heralded dominant winners in global Survivor history and arguably the best person to never win Australian Survivor. But unlike maybe other All-Star seasons, it doesn't feel like we're left with still the sort of stars versus scrubs cast. I think this cast has proved its worth. It didn't necessarily need to, but it did wholeheartedly. And while this episode may have been the least epic out of the 3, that is still damning with faint praise because there's still so much fun stuff to get into from episode 3 here.
Well, that's why you cast consistent All-Star seasons, right? That's why the worst thing that can happen in an All-Star season is that it's an inconsistent cast, because then when the big dogs go, you are left with and they always do because it's an obvious disparity, and then you're left with, the B players, the C
The
players.
hyenas.
Yeah, and it's not good, and the boot order defines the season. Whereas here, if you're going to have everyone be legendary, not all on the same scale, but all bring their own element to it in kind of individual ways, then you're always going to have some heartbreak over people going because they're a legend in their own right, but then you're also going to be left with the rest. And then I think if we look at a glass half full of who we're left with, which I think a lot of the audience is kind of able to do, but I think that it's a great, obviously it's all really, really good. We've lost 3 men. And so what, do we have 3 men left in the whole cast? Yeah,
Yes, because
Luke,
it started
Cody, and
with 8
Tommy.
and 6, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So people aren't going to be mad about that. So I
No.
think people are loving this boot order probably, even though we have lost 3 legends.
Yeah. I'm intrigued, Shannon, because the ratings are starting to come in up. The ratings are up verily over Brains versus Brawn too. And obviously, we have talked in the past about how Channel 10 is in a bit of dire straits at the moment. Do you think if, provided that everything goes at least okay with the upcoming season of AU, that this might become more of a frequent occurrence?
It's a winning formula. I mean, whatever they do, they could if they want to do the short formula, people have said have this be the schedule where you have like a newbie-ish, right? Maybe like a newbie-ish season for 50 something days or 40 something days. And then have like this short season, this like exhibition match, and that could be anything. Like I love it in this global match. I would have that every year. But you could do celebrities, which they kind of already do, but bigger celebrities. You could do, US Survivor could do this. You could do, you could just make it like the biggest all-stars. You could do like a clash of reality people. Like you could just kind of make it that exhibition style thing. But we will see. It is a winning formula and it has done really well, I think. So that's really wonderful. But yeah, this episode probably had the least of the 3, as you said, but there was still a lot of fun stuff. I really liked the tribes interacting. So I'm upset that not only are they not going to swap, but they're going to have a double boot. I'm like, no, don't send home the people I love. Keep them
Yeah.
in. Have non-boot. Make it like Lego Masters where I want people to never
Pushing
go.
for
I just want
non-eliminations,
them to go.
Shannon, in a
Yeah, I
16-day
want that.
season.
I don't want anyone to be eliminated, and they all just get to be best friends, so I can see them interact. Like that's
What
what
a
I say about Lego
difference a
Masters.
cast makes that you really like. I don't know if you could look yourself in the mirror and be able to say that, like,
I'm
yes, I
fickle.
need more non. Honestly, what I would say in response to your other statement, this translates in a number of ways. Is I'm a fan of RuPaul's Drag Race, and what I do worry about, I love this formula, and this season has again very much outkicked even the concept on paper. I do worry that, if we do especially make this an annual thing, that the concept might run its course. I do like your idea of not always having to do like returning Australian Survivor players. Because again, the thing with Drag Race All Stars was like, especially its second season, was one of the best casts they've ever assembled, and it was amazing and heralded still as one of the greatest seasons the show has ever produced. And now they keep doing it every single year, and not only does it feel less special, but like we're starting to, with no offense to some of these queens, start really like plumbing the bottom of the barrel of like, all right, well, I guess we haven't seen this first boot play again. Let's get the opportunity to do so. But I also make that comparison because we've had 2 seasons of Drag Race All-Stars so far that have been non-elimination, that nobody has been eliminated. One season they played for charity. The other one was sort of the Winners at War season, so they didn't want to eliminate everybody, and fans did not necessarily like that. But
I'm kidding. Don't do that. Don't take what I said. I was making a joke. Please don't. Please eliminate them. It's fine.
I'm glad
but
we
not
got
a double. That's not cool. Not a double. That's too quick.
Yeah, but what I will say is, yes, I agree. The tribe cross-pollination has been fantastic to watch. Obviously more so the Australians reacting to some of the legends on the world version, not necessarily the other way around. But we lost, one of the major mouthpieces of that, to the point that, as Shaunie talked about, George knew their pets' names, their mother's maiden names. Now, maybe that was to try to hack their accounts and, be able to do a nice case of identity theft. But maybe George wished he was able to choose another identity, considering what's going to befall him in this episode.
Yeah, I mean, George was it's kind of like Rob. Like, Rob came in playing at a really different speed to everyone else, and he was clearly the odd man out, and then they came for that aggressive gameplay. George has been too loud from the beginning. As we've said, the match chat has not been heated, and George loves a heated match chat. Like, George is going to be speaking across the aisle. George is going to be outing secrets, and I was surprised it hadn't happened yet, and we got that here. I will say there was a lot of great moments between mostly George and the internationals. My favorite by far, again, tough competition, but I loved when like he jokingly tried to bait Tony by being like, I blew you a kiss, blow me a kiss, because Tony had 2 hands on the bags.
Yeah.
And Tony very earnestly was like, I can't, don't have hands.
Yeah, or him going like,
that's the point. That's
come on,
the joke.
George, why don't you give me a hug? Like, that's the fun thing too, is I think George really loves banter. And so I think, he did enjoy that brief window where like he was able to get shit talked back to after shit talking a lot. And yeah, I mean, you bring up a really good point. I think we could use this podcast, especially with it being a bit of like, certainly as a step down in terms of the massive amount of hyper gaming that's been going on, but to kind of look back on the week, because when we look at trends that have been occurring over these first 3 episodes, probably sets the pace for what we are to expect over the next 7. And besides even getting rid of, the big threats, as Kirby's going to say, like, who cares about shields? We just all have swords at this point, gladiator style, duking it out in the arena. I think that, at least 2 of the boots that we see in this episode come from the fact that when it comes to this season, especially, we're seeing a lot of Tigers that are not able to change their stripes. You and Chappelle talked about this a number of times, that Rob Bentley came in. He only knew one way to play, and that's to like build a sort of cult mentality around us versus them, really trying to strong arm people into feeling submissive so that they go on to his side. And I think Shaunie vocalizes it really interestingly, that even though Heroes versus Villains was technically a half returnee season, by and large, George's playbook works with new players, with people who do not necessarily maybe have their own sort of like sense of security and confidence when it comes to their own gameplay, where they feel they can push back against the strong arming that he is able to do. And so what he experienced with this particular group is the fact that like, yeah, listen, with no offense to, your Jerrys and your Matts, like, these returnees are not going to take incredibly well to walking up to them and providing an ultimatum or threat, depending on how you define it with the roam or Sol variety.
I think there was a little rich coming from Shaunie when he played with her and blindsided her. But I do think, yeah, I mean, George picked up like a lot of the newbies, Liz and Matt and Jerry, and also got rid of a lot of the newbies like Fraser, who were like his victims. I think that George was off kilter from the beginning in this season. He came in such a bad spot, then kind of worked into what should have been a group. Then he threw that away. Then he kind of worked back like maybe it could have worked. Maybe if he just laid a little low. And then he threw that away and then he went home. And it was like that was the whole trajectory. But it started low. It had more hope than you'd think. And then it was done. Like if you had told me before the season that an early boot was a unanimous George boot, I'd be like, yes, that makes sense. If you'd even told me at the end of last episode it's going to be unanimous George boot, I'd be like, fair. Yes, that makes sense. But there was intrigue here for the reason of, in terms of leopards not changing their spot, Sarah's been Sarah-ing. Tough one, that one. And she wants to break from Shaunie. So it's not just like, okay, we have the buffer to take out George, may as well, and then we'll still be 3-2. It really pushes, firstly, that this is not a 3 at all. It's not a 3-2. And also it pushes Sarah away from Kirby. And now I don't know where this tribe stands. Like now I think that Luke and Janine have flipped themselves. It's so interesting that in 2 tribal councils, I thought Shaunie was at the bottom, she flipped up. I thought Luke and Janine then were at the bottom. I think they flipped up. I think Luke and Janine are in a great spot now because I don't know how intentional this is, but this obviously takes out George, who is actively targeting them in a very aggressive way. It keeps in Sarah, obviously, well, no one's taking out Sarah, but it keeps Sarah away from Kirby, and it keeps in a big Sarah-Shaunie division, the biggest probably of the divisions, even bigger than, say, Kirby-George would have been, despite the many issues that have happened in the last couple of days. With a very workable ally for them in Sarah, who Luke has worked with and always come back with before. So I think this puts Luke, especially Luke and Janine, in a really great spot. And that changes everything, even though it was George going here, who kind of could have been a, pretty unanimous vote for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, to, I guess, quote somebody who has 2 hands on 2 sandbags right now, it's more of an alliance of numbers versus comfort when it came to those 3 women. And that, what I loved, what was so delicious about the editing in this episode is when you get the Kirby classic obscured vote, right, where she's basically like, this is to help, solidify a connection with one of my allies. And that could really go either direction, right? It could have been, I will placate Sarah by getting rid of Shaunie, or in this case, it was, I will placate Shaunie by getting rid of George. But yeah, I mean, it very much seems like, if you had Shaunie and Sarah in a room together, it's like that one storyline on Seinfeld with George and Elaine, where it's like, yeah, without Jerry, we don't really know
like the
what
Phoebe
to
and
talk
Chandler.
About. Exactly. And so,
I think Phoebe and Chandler really love each other. But it's fine.
Yeah, there was that one episode where they tried to awkwardly flirt with one another. I don't know if that's happening with Sarah.
That's my favorite
Shaunie.
Episode. That's a lot of people's favorite episode.
It's a very good one.
One where everyone finds out. A classic.
Well, that's the thing, is that will Shaunie know that they know that she knows? Because that's the thing too, is that we get, some really fun sound bites towards the end of the episode. We'll get into it with like the post George aftermath, but as Shaunie says, she's the one that's going to take the credit, at least in the moment, for the George blindside. Sarah's going to speak up and be like, well, actually, it was all of us. And Shaunie's like, including the 2 votes against me. And then Janine's like, yep, sorry, but, can't necessarily hide behind anything when there's 6 people left on the tribe. But even though, I don't think Sarah really, on the one hand, she didn't have anything directly to do with it by being like, I'm going to, you 2 vote for Shaunie. She does get approached with this information. And while she does eventually vote for George, this could be a guilty by association thing where Shaunie's like, I know that she's close with Luke. She could have turned the vote on me, and she might be able to do it next time. So, yeah, I agree with you, despite the fact that Luke and Janine were essentially antagonized over the course of this entire episode by George. And we'll get into this with the Chisy. Like, I don't necessarily know if this is something they actively pursued. Janine has the very incorrect read of George has got an idol. We got to throw a couple votes onto Shaunie. I do think that they have ended up in a very good position, considering that, this season so far on the Australia tribe has proven that even the concept of voting blocks are shaky AF.
I'm going to defend the intentionality from Luke and Janine. Firstly, in terms of defending the split, it's unfortunate for Luke, who has to go along with it. He knows where the idol is, like he has it. But to give trust to Janine, and he doesn't want to say that back, he'll do the split. And it does divide them a bit from Shaunie. But again, if they're going to be relying on Sarah, that matters less. Again, they could also use it to be like, Sarah told us the name of who the split should be and try and put that on, which is something Luke just did where he said, oh, George was going to vote for Shaunie. So I do think, firstly, that's very intentional. And I think that he could do that again. And I get even putting 2 votes, because if I'm Janine and I want to throw 1 vote because he could have an idol, and George often does, and we haven't seen the idol, David didn't have the idol, so who has the idol in the small group? It's actually not terrible odds. And then they vote for George, and then it's a 1-1. He's voted for, say, Janine. She's voted for Shaunie, and now it's a 1-1. So who's voting Janine out? And who's voting Shaunie out? Luke's voting Shaunie out. Kirby's voting Janine out. George is voting Janine out in this world, obviously. And then it comes down to Sarah to
when Sarah forced rocks, yeah.
Yeah, so it's just more comfortable to have 2 votes there, and I kind of see her being conservative in that, so I don't mind that. I think Luke is very intentional. I think they were both good here. I think, again, like, Luke sows that division from the beginning. The way that Luke just uses language compared to some other people this week, George and Rob Bentley, probably chief among them, in terms of he like, you can see him, he stops himself, like, when he wants to give George as the vote instead of Shaunie, where he's like, do we think it's a good idea? Instead of saying, I think it's a good idea, he's like, do we think? What do we? I keep hearing someone saying, and then like, but it's you, but it's fine, and people are into it, and Kirby jumps on that. So I think stuff like that is really good. I liked how he's the way he reasoned with it, which did make sense. Like, if we take out George and we merge soon and don't go to another tribal, which was a fine bet, we'll be more united. Like, he had good reasons. I think there was a lot of good stuff for Luke, and to Luke's extreme credit, I argued on the podcast yesterday that I didn't like him not using the idol for David. But yeah. Luke is crafty. And again, like, Luke can be good at not seeming that intentional, but he's thinking. And now he's kept his idol, which he seemed like pretty blindsided by the David thing. He wasn't going to play the idol, but he didn't play the idol. He has his idol. Now he's in a great spot. And I think he worked for it. And he took out a person who, again, it wasn't like kind of what between, say, like Lisa was like in the first episode, where it was bad ally Rob and like better ally Pav. And like maybe in a shorter game that matters less. This was like workable Shaunie and George, who is like not an option. Like, George is so done that you have to take out the person who's aggressively pursuing you like that. So I think this was great. I think it was great in the decision. I think it was great in the way that he and Janine, but mostly Luke, went about it. And I don't have a lot of notes.
I love the idea, by the way, and hopefully Cass will do the same, that Luke has not told even Janine about the idol, because I think that, there's a lot of conservative fear that can be baked into small tribes. And I think that, had he told Janine earlier in the day, because we certainly have seen that situation, right, where like a few people will end up at the bottom, and they're like, okay, well, don't worry, I have an idol, so we can work together to engineer something. But again, we talk about the Phoebe Chandler comparison. That's a little bit of Luke and Janine as well. We're like, yes, they technically were on the same season, but David seemed to have the much tighter relationship with Janine.
I don't think so.
I mean, Luke, did they just have they had a conversation to start the episode where they're like, all right, I guess we're working together.
No, that's not how I think obviously Luke and David are Luke and David, but I think that it's always been Luke and Janine above David and Janine. Like, Janine blindsided Luke and then David. She blindsided David and then worked with Luke.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm taking it more so that Luke says at the beginning of the episode, like, all right, I guess Janine and I are locked into each other, which I took to mean like, okay, now this is like formally solidified as a twosome. But I think even if he did tell her, hey, I have this idol, if she takes George's ultimatum a certain way, she could very easily be like, all right, listen, I will force this, I'll flip on Luke, because guess what? He has an idol. She could easily out that information.
Flip on anyone at this point.
Exactly. If she is in desperation mode. And I feel like even if he tells her they're like, don't worry, he doesn't have the idol, I do. I don't know. We saw this even with like Card and AJ, right? That like, if you reveal this information to somebody in a very vulnerable moment, they might take it a certain way. And I think, especially from Luke's perspective, he just experienced having his legs cut out from under him, his closest ally gone in an instant, with him none the wiser. I think he very much is like, I have to hang on to this thing when I know that I am in danger, and if I tell anyone about it, it's going to put me even more in danger. But I think you bring up some good points as to like what they were able to take advantage of, right? That they were not the ones initially floating this out. This is very clearly a Shaunie idea. And what did you make of that? Shaunie's going to go with the revenge plot here. I personally think that's much more a TV thing than a strategic thing. I think there are strategic merits for her to get rid of George, that she just dressed up as, this is all about revenge, baby. I guess to quote, a theme that might be occurring in a future Australian Survivor season.
Yeah, and also just to backtrack on the split for Janine. So the best case scenario for her is a tie. Because Kirby's not voting out Shaunie and George isn't voting out Shaunie. And then it's Sarah not going with Kirby to force a tie, which is highly unlikely based on everything Sarah's done so far. So you got to put the 2 votes on. So I actually think that was like, it wasn't egregious, I don't think. It was conservative, but it made sense. In terms of Shaunie, it's hard because there's 2 different things going on here. Like, if Sarah is with Shaunie, and I kind of think like Shaunie must assume Sarah is. Like, I was really shocked by this. I was like, you're in an alliance. And Sarah's like, no. Like, that's a friend of a friend. Like, that's very much, the Chandler to my Phoebe. And I, like, even more so, that's like Gunther to me, like, that's like completely gone. So it's like,
well, she does serve, much like Gunther.
Yeah, well, yes, that's true. So if Sarah is with them, then this is fine. George was looking to come for her. He was going to vote for her. It's very much fool me once, fool me twice. Like, how much can you really trust George? And she gets the revenge. I loved her content around, like, is it going to be like Stevie never getting me? Is it going to be Sue's big move, which they left
This is wild to me that of all people, if you had to, guess before the season, who's going to be the most meta contestant on Australia versus the world? Yeah, exactly. Like Shaunie would be the one making the most in-house references on Australia versus the world. But I love that. That is like maybe one of the deepest cuts we've ever heard in terms of references on Australian Survivor.
She quoted a meme, which was amazing. But I do think that, so if she's going to be if they're going to come back to that 3-2 on Luke and Janine and be united, because it seems like she could have worked with Luke and Janine going into a possible merge, I think that's a great spot. The issue is with Sarah coming for her, like, that's a more desperate situation. Now, she can't take out Sarah because Luke's not doing that, Janine's not doing that, Kirby's not doing that stuff. If she could, like, if I was Shaunie and I knew about Sarah, which she doesn't, I think I would rather take out an ally or a possible option for Sarah in a Luke or Janine. Now, how possible is that? Probably not, because Kirby wants George, Sarah wants her, Luke and Janine want George. So, and she'd need to be working with George, Sarah, and Kirby, or some combination of that to take out Luke and Janine. Sarah's not going to want to do that. Kirby seems like she has bigger fish to fry. George is doing it. Just George. But I think, like, in a world where she knows that Sarah's actually a bigger issue for her than George, then, like, you try to weaken that, because Sarah has allies. Sarah has options. George is weakened. It's not that he didn't try to come for you, but he actually seems kind of back all in with Shaunie. You're sleeping with one eye open. I'm not saying it's the best case scenario, but it kind of feels like she actually has bigger issues than George. But A, she doesn't know it, and B, even if she did, I don't think there's anything she could do about it. So I do not think Shaunie's in a good spot. I could see Shaunie going home next. I could see Sarah now being pushed to Luke and Janine, but maybe not far enough to take out a Kirby, and taking out a Shaunie next time. If George is kept in and she's somehow willing to or able to get rid of, say, a Janine or a Luke, then maybe she has George, and then maybe she definitely has Kirby, so then she's fine. But I just don't think she knew to achieve that, and I don't think she could have achieved that. I actually think she was relying on George more than she knew to be, and now she's kind of lost what actually seemed like could have been an option for her in George, which is highly insane, but I do think it got to that point.
I agree with it to a certain extent. I mean, hopefully you'll get the chance to talk with George and really clarify, like, did he have plans on going with Shaunie to the end? I would imagine so, just because I think he feels
not to the end, just like to the merge in, like.
And I think that's where her concern is. To your point about fool me once, fool me twice, and I think actually a large indicator of why this George vote happened when it did the way it did is because the thought of an upcoming merge. This is a case where really your reputation precedes you as a returning player, and George is going to be able to talk up the positive aspects of that, of like, hey, listen, twice before, we're probably going to come to the merge down in numbers. I was able to turn this around, be able to corral people to my side from the opposition, and then be able to have our group make its way to the end. Don't you want me there? And yes, I agree. It's like a fantastic spin for him to make. As was pointed out, A, he was not the only person to do this, as, Luke has pretty much done this twice. And B, it does also mean, like, you were able to take your group to the end. The question is, who is in your group? You know, as you
Yeah.
mentioned, it was not going to be, okay, here are the vigilantes. We're going to be in the final 7. Like, no, there were certainly shots that were taken from George's perspective, one of them being Shaunie. And the other idea is, again, if you look at what George is doing during these challenges, he is very clearly trying to make connections with the other tribe. And so I think there is an inherent built-in worry there that, like, yes, in this moment, George really wants to work with me, and I think he would want to honor that to a certain extent. On the other hand, what are the chances that when we get to emerge, he pulls over a Tony, a Parvati, a Suri, and says, like, I'm your biggest fans. I want to work with you. Screw the Australians. I'm the one that's being turncoat here. Because again, that's also something he's done before.
Yeah, but George doesn't have a group to do that, and that in itself makes him less important to take out. You know what I mean? Like, even if he's not with you, what is George doing? Like, his game has been gutted from the beginning. Like, I feel like he's always a good buffer, at the very least, possibly to kind of push him there. And yeah, I feel like he's just like on an island and has no one there, like literally. So I don't know what he can really do to Shaunie at this point. And even on the other side, like who is buying what George is selling? Lisa called him insufferable. Like, do you think Parv is enjoying it? Like, I know he's trying, but it feels like people were not picking up what he was putting down. Really, like he just doesn't seem like that much of a threat. I think what Sarah has going on is more threatening because she has like active numbers, but Shaunie doesn't know that Sarah's against her. But I do think with George, the way he's able to put these groups together and then win is George needs space and numbers. Like I think we've probably said before, like George wouldn't know what to do with the new era. And we've kind of seen that here, right?
Yeah.
Like we saw George needs to be able to go to 2 people and be so offensive in Luke and Janine and still have enough options. You know what I mean? Like he needs to
Right.
have
Yeah.
enemies, but then find the odd friend.
That's it, is that he's able to, I think, be so public about, like, here's who I'm against, so therefore inferring that I'm with you, right? Like, I didn't call you
Yeah.
out, so therefore you're not my enemy. I'm against Simon, so work with me. You know, that was the whole big pitch he makes to Stevie in that infamous episode 7 Tribal Council's like, look what Simon's going to do to you. I'm against Simon. You should be against Simon. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. And it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily work here. I think, A, because, again, people are not necessarily loving the way that he is doing this, right? The fact that he does start this episode by being like, I trust you all. Thank you all for protecting me. You know, I'm willing to sort of like sit back and do whatever you all want to do. And then proceeds to, you know, hours later be like, all right, so here's the plan. We're going to split 2-2. And then I'm going to approach Luke and Janine and force them to vote against one another, which again is sort of like a greatest hit, right? This is what he was able to do with the episode 7 Tribal Council of being like, hey, if you don't do this, then this is going to happen to you. And again, depending on the chemistry of the people you're with, and especially in that moment, you're able to make it happen. George did have an idol that he was able to brandish as well. Not so much in this case. The only cudgel he had to wield in the moment was like, I have the numbers. And as you mentioned, that was not necessarily the case as much as it has been in the past.
Yeah, and in George's defense to what I just said, like the episode 7 Tribal Council was in a small 7-person group. He definitely plays
Yeah.
great in end games where he's done these like wonderful plurality votes, you know, at a final 4 with a 2-1-1, at a final 5 with a 2-2-1. Like he's done some fun stuff in small numbers. But I do think that George's, especially maybe in the early game, that type of like me v you, or like at least in an early merge, it does benefit from the space of Australian Survivor. Like if you look at the Brains tribe, like 8 people in that tribe hated him, but he was still able to find, you know, there was enough people that even when that's true and it's more people than this whole tribe, he still finds a car and a bait, and then Haley's going to help him out. So I think he needed to find a number he never did, and he burned every bridge except really Sarah. I mean, Luke and Janine, it speaks for itself. I'm like, at the very least, this is terrible from a networking perspective. Like, don't talk to Janine like that personally in the game or professionally. Like
that's gonna say, I think
Alice.
there's a photo of George up in every Boost Juice shop across Australia that says, please do not sell to this man, because good Lord. And that's interesting as well, is that, you know, maybe it's the fact that he was trying to create this working relationship with Luke, though that was like incredibly acrimonious, where he was basically like, okay, Luke, yeah, you're really gonna prove this? Yeah, but still, it was very much like him trying to come in on his high horse of like, well, Luke, you burned me before, but you're gonna have to listen to me here, and maybe, you know, we'll be even. Yeah, sure, exactly. The slate will be wiped clean, but I think that the way he went after Janine did feel very understandably targeted. Maybe he thought he could rile her up more. Maybe it was, again, to be like, I'm not coming after you, Luke. This is why I'm not throwing you under the bus as much as Janine. Though it's interesting, right? Because he voted for Luke, right? He was on the Luke in the split vote, despite Janine being like, well, he's obviously voting for me.
Yeah, well, he thought that that Janine would go because his understanding was Luke would vote for Janine, and Janine said she would never do that.
Yeah,
I think speaking to the closeness that
which
they
is also
have.
very fun that he tried to manufacture a 3-2-1 and then left on his own 3-2-1.
Yeah, and also Sarah was trying to get a different 3-2-1.
Yeah,
A lot going on here. A lot in homage to
again,
the
damning
other
with faint
tribe.
praise that this was again the least amount of complicated strategy, but this was, two different 3-2-1s possibly happening at once.
This was a split, but Sarah was trying to do an actual 3-2-1. She was trying to jump on Janine's split, and that would have been very, very fun. So I admire that she was trying to do that. But yeah, I mean, with George, like obviously you can't cut off options like that. Like even if Luke is the one who burned George, and he did, right? Like George was trying too much with Luke and David, and only felt pain from that. But you have to build bridges. You have to build false bridges in a game with so few people where you can't just cut off options like that. So the way he was acting towards Janine and Luke certainly did not endear himself to them. Kirby, he had the most insane conversation in Survivor history, like a day prior, where he threw her name under the bus. Shaunie speaks for itself. So it was like, where is a friend here? So, and a lot of that was self-made. But to be honest, he ran out of options. Like last episode went so badly that he never should have been able to come back from that, I think. And then he kind of maybe could have because Sarah had her own agenda going on. But then he made himself like an unavoidable target again. He was so loud. He was talking to the other tribe. He's not a wallflower, George.
Well, that's the thing is that like George is somebody who will be on a road trip and is like, I've had my turn driving. Let's pull over, if you want to take a turn. But then like he'll be in the passenger seat and be like, oh, okay, pass that card there. That like he'll say, I don't need to necessarily have the steering wheel in front of me, but also like you should be driving this particular way. And again, I agree that I think had he sort of like calmed down a bit here and maybe tried to feel out what Sarah was trying to do, like there's a chance he could say, hey, Shaunie is an option for me, but like, listen, I'm more than happy to make this happen. But again, I think because he had this sort of, I wouldn't even say vendetta because I don't know how like emotionally charged this was as much as it was, as we mentioned before, like publicly declaring an enemy as a tactic. But because he went so all in from that, hours after tribal council is like, all right, Luke and Janine are the enemies now. It didn't give him a lot to work with. Where like, I think if Sarah had approached him with the Shaunie plan, there would have been a chance that he's like, yeah, but I did publicly say that Luke and Janine were my enemies, so I have to go with that. And George is a big narrative person, right? He talked about this all the time when you two were covering Survivor UK. And so I think there was a part of him that kind of had this story stuck in his head of what he had to do next. And as a result, it unfortunately led to a bad fight. I mean, it's pretty wild that like George, who has been able to whip together some pretty miraculous votes in seasons past, leaves the game being 0 for 2 in voting with the majority and being in on the vote. And that's pretty dang wild. And maybe to your point, shows like this alternate universe where in Brains versus Brawn 1, if Kara doesn't play an idol on him and there's no non-elimination, that like this could have been the outcome for George in his very first Survivor season.
This was not his season. This was not his game. Like the Brains 1.0 beach was not his game. And then it flipped and it's been his game ever since. He's not been out of votes since then. And as you said, he has been here twice. It was kind of funny that he came back so much like he'd won. Like he voted alone and then was like, we did it. Like who did it? 3 people voted technically against what could have been a majority from David's group. Like he picked David and Luke and they lost. David went home like you were in the losing group. But then also what happened was David's group didn't pick you. So it was like both didn't pick you. So that's actually why David went home. Like he could have been in a 4 voting against Shaunie with David and David didn't trust him. So I don't know why he came back like, we did it. Like we took out David. Like who took out David? You were listening to Luke. Like you were talking to David at Tribal Council. You were in their ear. Why do you assume you're with this group? And it honestly like still maybe could have worked again because Sarah wanted to take out Shaunie. Like he might have still floated by, but I don't know why he was like, oh, we're a majority against 2 people and they'll split on each other. Like
we did it, Joe.
It was in that narrative. Like, yeah, who else was like in that narrative of this majority and this minority? Like, I don't know. I think maybe like Kirby and Shaunie were thinking they were with Sarah, but I don't think that they thought like with George. Like this is the 4. We did it.
So let's talk about Sarah here because she was, when she's approached with the idea of at least Janine saying like, I'm going to throw a vote onto Shaunie just because I think he provides some very sound reasoning as to why it had to be 2 votes instead of 1, that forcing a tie would not actually be like the ideal outcome to keep Janine in the game. Do you think she
Yeah,
should have
because no one
gone?
actually wants Shaunie out. So it's
Yeah.
not great to tie with Shaunie because Kirby's not doing that and George isn't doing that. So like people don't want Shaunie out of the game that enough to win on a revote where 4 people are voting.
So I guess the question is, would the possible social expense of like Sarah's gone rogue, gets rid of Shaunie, which again, like even Luke and Janine didn't want to do first and foremost. It was more so a security, and she took advantage of that. Does that outweigh the benefits from her perspective of getting rid of this person that she thinks about her, right? That she's a shady lady who's flipping all over the place.
I think Sarah should go for Shaunie. Like I think that's
Hmm.
fine because Sarah has been in the middle of these groups and can benefit from taking out people she works less well with. Like if you look at the tribe, if Shaunie goes, she has George as a buffer. Also, George hasn't burnt her, which is rare, which is the only person in this group that George hasn't burnt.
To be fair, it's
And
been like 4 days in the game, but that's still 4 days too many for George to not burn somebody.
yeah, she's the only one, so she's unscathed, which is I think so, right? Did George burn Sarah? No, I don't think so.
I don't think
So
so.
yeah,
No.
that's good. And then Sarah's still close with Kirby. And then she's got Luke and Janine as options, and she's worked again with Luke. She's come back with Luke many times in their previous season. That's a good looking tribe for her. And she, for some reason, I don't know how it got to this point. That's going to be my first question for whenever I speak to Shaunie and Sarah, hopefully in a long, long time. How did this happen? Like, why is it so bad with Sarah and Shaunie? But my issue with Sarah is like, while I think that makes sense, like last time I also thought it made sense for her to want David and to say name and for her to want to vote with Kirby and David. I'm like, that makes sense to you, but you don't have the capital to make it happen. And here it happens again. Really, what I think is going on is that Kirby and Sarah are not good allies in that they both had two, like they're in their number twos for each other.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
their top two people are each other, and then the other person's biggest ops. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Sarah's top person is Kirby and David, who Kirby wants out the most. And Kirby's top two people are Sarah and Shaunie, who Sarah wants out the most. That's a very unfortunate situation to be in. And clearly, Kirby's like a stronger personality who's going to get her way. So this is like ripping at the seams. I think that what Sarah has wanted for her game has made sense, but I just think that it's undoable in the position that she's been put in here, where working with Kirby is actually at cross purposes from what she wants. Like there are two allies who are not in lockstep and who want like completely different things.
Yeah, what I think is so interesting is that I think to watch, again, for everyone that's so regimented in their gameplay, sometimes to their detriment. I mean, we could also talk about Kirby. Like, Kirby's kind of playing the Kirby game that she knows as well, where you have that quote that's so great where Sarah's like, George can be a shield, and Kirby's like, screw shields. Like, that's also kind of the way Kirby has always operated. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like, I don't think she's ever really played with this meat shield strategy to
No
her.
one was a shield for Kirby in Titans Rebels.
She was her own. She was her own shield.
Yeah.
Again, week after week, we're like, how is she being protected here? But I think that Sarah, as she mentioned last episode, I think really wanted to change up this reputation of like not even necessarily being a flip flopper, but kind of like having her hands in a bunch of different pots of like working with so many different people. And if you're working with everyone, you're working with no one. But I think that she comes into this deal with kind of the devil in the form of Kirby under the guise of like, I do a favor for you, you do a favor for me. Like, okay, I was able to flip on David, and granted, part of that was something that she wanted to do, but she very much was vocalizing, I do this to cement my loyalty to Kirby. And Kirby does say that she wants this to be personified as a two-way street, and it doesn't necessarily look to be one. So on the one hand, I do think that Sarah's getting this sense of, okay, I have a feeling that working with Kirby is not great because even if, almost like in a George sense, even if she claims that she wants to do something to help me, she's not listening to me. On the other hand, I can imagine there's a moment, at least in this vote, and now I do think, you say that Shaunie's in trouble. I think Kirby's in the most trouble. Maybe we'll get into that in a little bit. But I think that she is feeling reticent, at least in this moment, of being that Sarah, of being that girl I knew you would, to quote a Drag Race All-Star season, of like, if I flip in this moment and take out Shaunie, then I'm just back to where I was before of the person who's now working with everybody. And therefore, a Michelle Dugan's going to come along and pick me off unanimously. And so maybe there is this idea that like this fantastical element in her head of like, okay, I do not want to do this at this moment, but like, let me still showcase my loyalty right here to Kirby and not go over the top and really, have me become the tallest poppy in the tribe by kind of single-handedly determining that Shaunie goes, especially right before a merge. But I do think this is like a very tenuous wallpapering over a larger hole in the wall that I think, as we saw in the next time on, is maybe recent as soon as next round where we know they're going to tribal council. It could be a like, all right, I can make this happen. We know that merge is coming up. I think it's time that, I stick with the side at this point, and the side will not be the side that I'm currently with.
Also, she doesn't know that she can literally be the difference because she doesn't know
That's
it's going
true.
to be
She thinks it
two.
would just be a 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she actually needs Kirby's vote. Like last episode, she was the actual swing, and she went to Kirby for a vote that they didn't need because she wanted to work with Kirby. I think that pushing it to here, if she was that swing vote again, I think maybe she does do it because I think she's getting that frustrated and wanting to actually take agency in her game. But here, she's very stuck because she's playing Kirby's game. Kirby again has all the power to make this decision, which is crazy, by the way. She has so much power. She's so cool. I just want to be Kirby. But yeah, like we can talk about the decision, but literally she thinks that they're jumping onto a 3-2-1. She can't do it alone.
Yeah.
So she actually asked Kirby, and I feel like Kirby was like, I hold the card. You held the cards last episode and you made the decision for me. Thank you. I hold the cards this episode and I'll make the decision for me. It's going great for me. But as we said last episode, she's pushed her allies past the point of comfort, and that might be a concern for Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
She gets it done and she worries about it later. Now might be the time to worry. Now it might have actually caught up with her. But I think with Kirby, she's in a very tough spot. This is really tough. And I don't know it's such a tweener for Kirby because I'm like, you really can't let Shaunie go. Long term, you want Shaunie in the game. They've had the secret alliance from the beginning. It feels like a very important bond for her. Like just giving it up just because Sarah wants to. I can see why she's like, no, like that's my other number, right? Like it's hard to know who the actual ride or die is because like Sarah's her ride or die, but Shaunie's like the secret ride or die. Like it feels like they're both really
Which is not so secret, it seems like, from the way Sarah's kind of personifying it.
Well, she knows that they're in a 3 now, so she's felt like it's her and Kirby, and this has actually surprised her that Shaunie's so much in there. But we know that they've had a bond from the beginning. But I think as well, now, unfortunately, this looks bad. Because in a world where she votes out Shaunie here, she keeps Sarah with her. She has George with as a buffer. Like, who is voting out Kirby in that group? Like, Sarah's not because she's not angry. George is the buffer. Like, and you might not go to tribal council, but if you do, I feel like she's not going home. Whereas now, if Sarah's mad, she goes to Luke and Janine. And they could vote out Kirby or Shaunie. Like, how mad is Sarah? Is she mad at, like, I still want to vote out Shaunie, or is she mad at Kirby so much that it could be Kirby? Now, if they wanted to vote out Shaunie, could it even be done? Because George isn't doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is what's so interesting. Is like, even if Kirby said yes, it would have to be on the split. That's right. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, they could have done it. So, yeah. So, it's because they obviously want George. But, yeah, so she could have done it. So, yeah, and she made the decision. Kirby makes the full decision not to do that. And, like, I can't really blame her. I think long-term it's better. I think short-term I'm very concerned.
That's the thing. And that's, again, the way that Kirby has played, right? Is that we came back after basically every episode of Titans versus Rebels being like, I cannot believe she is making this move. She's putting herself way out in front. And again, she was able to have that work to her benefit basically the entirety until people really caught on to her game towards the end. And then she had to kind of like challenge beast her way into the final 5. But here, I mean, when you come back from tribal council and everyone is approaching you and is like, you're the best player here right now. Look what you were able to do. You toppled the golden god. That is not great, especially when if you were sort of promoting this culture within your own tribe of like, screw shields, get rid of the big players. That's the primary concern. She is, despite being one of the least connected going into this season, period, one of the biggest threats on that tribe. And so I very much think that if Luke and Janine are in the power, the catbird seat here next episode and are like, between Kirby and Shaunie, it's 100% Kirby, in my opinion, considering what she was able to do with people she didn't know from a hole in the wall.
But Sarah's upset. Okay, let's just talk about it, Sarah, before we get really... I mean, look, it's not a good option either way. Let's be honest. Let's not do a double boot. Let's go to some sort of merge. Anyway, whatever. They're going to go to tribal council. They're both going to tribal council. Is it... Well, I think that George should have gone, I'll do Shaunie next. Please don't put me out. Like, is this the part where she has to actually push Shaunie under the bus? But it's like, I'll try to keep Shaunie. If we don't go to tribal council again, which is a very big consideration, they could merge now. They could not, lose a challenge. Now, we know it's a double boot, but they don't know that. Then I've kept Shaunie. But if it comes down to it and it puts me in a worse spot and Sarah's so mad and she wants to go back to old allies, I still can say I am now willing to do what you want. For the first time, you call the shot, Sarah. We still get to be allies. And now I'll push Shaunie under the bus and then we can go to the merge. Like that still is an option for her. How
I
much
can
did she
see that.
rectify the situation?
Yes, but I think, and this is maybe something that has been kind of under established, but I have to imagine it's kind of like a beat thrumming throughout this Australia tribe dynamic is the fact that like Shaunie does have at least some sort of form of relationship with a Luke, with a Janine, right? Like I feel like alumni talk all the time about like closely associating with the people that have played not in your season, but around your seasons. You know, they end up playing the year after Shaunie does. They're not both a part of
Well,
All Stars, but
yeah,
obviously they're
Luke is
part
on
of the.
either side of Shaunie.
And to be fair,
It's
so
a Shaunie
far,
sandwich.
yeah, exactly. And to be fair, Shaunie has not taken a shot against either one of them so far. She voted out David, and she could have another axe to grind there, much like she did with the George narrative of like, hey, he helped get me out of All Stars, so now I'm going to return the favor. So far, she hasn't taken a direct shot at either one of them. She's more so maybe she could, again, put forward this narrative of like, I'm getting revenge against these two guys that took me out in my earlier seasons. So you would have to like take a shot, right? This would not necessarily feel like some sort of return fire of like, oh my God, she's gunning for me. As opposed to, again, Kirby, who is very loosely connected and again, presents herself as big game hunting. If I'm a Luke, I think I'd be much more in fear of a Kirby than a Shaunie any day of the week by her just being so public with that motto.
But in saying that, they just voted against Shaunie. They just split on her.
Mm.
So that might be a divide. They came together as a 4 now, where they were talking about that split, which they could do again, especially now that they have split on Shaunie. And Luke knows Kirby from life. So that, like, he literally is friends with. He literally is the only person she came in actually having a relationship with, and that's not played out other than a short conversation about like, Luke, would you turn on David? And he's like, no. And it went that far. But I still do think there's a working relationship with Kirby as much as there's one with Shaunie, and probably more. Also because Kirby's amazing. Everyone who meets Kirby just wants to work with her so much. Not that that's untrue of Shaunie, but like we're talking about two of the best social players in the game here. So I think Kirby could do that. I think Kirby could say, I'm very sorry. George had to go, but next is Shaunie if we go to tribal. And then if they do go to tribal, then throw Shaunie under the bus. It's not pretty, but we got through it. So I think that there's something there for Kirby. But do you have more on this tribe, or should we go to the Worlds?
I don't think so. I mean, what did you make of sort of like George on the way out here? I mean, again, a very humorous final couple of minutes here with the back and forth of, Sarah declaring that it was everybody, and then Shaunie being like, oh, who the hell voted for me, in her nicest Rupert impression possible. JLP for completely forgetting one of Luke's branded nicknames by being like, aha, I've got the perfect soundbite. The God
That was
has
brilliant. That was so fun because it was like, there's never just one king. Like, that in this tribe of even just the 2 men left, they were both called kings. Welcome to Australian Survivor. Like, you should have known that.
Exactly. It's like, come on. All the guys that you brought back for this tribe had some sort of preconceived nickname going into it. But I loved Luke being like, what the hell, man? Come on. I was the first one to call myself a king nickname here. And that's also fun in that it connected to the odd post-credits vote that we got in episode 2, right? Where Luke makes this very incorrect vote being like, there's only one king here, the once and future king. And now he was able to finally come through on that. But George, very publicly doing the Omer Marianne thing of like, was it you? Shaunie saying it was. I mean, again, there's a lot of things that can be said about George, but, as much as we might talk about, we don't need to necessarily everyone be so kumbaya when their dreams get dashed and they're voted out. Like, it is fun to see that George is so in love with this game that like he will very easily be like, yep, good for you for getting rid of me. Listen, I'm the guy that made Australian Survivor make the New York Times list. Like, you were right to do so. No harm, no foul. And it goes to show that maybe Shaunie in that moment, A, felt like she made the right decision, but B, as we talked about, could also be almost a Kirby-esque moment coming out of this vote where it's like, look what Shaunie was able to accomplish. What else could she do?
Which is so funny because Shaunie's getting split on in her own vote. Like, she's getting the credit for it. But if anything, it's between her and George, and she's on the split. Like, it's a defensive vote. But I think more than she realizes, because she has this big blind spot of Sarah, it's really Kirby who's making the decision here to take out George. And it's really jumping on Luke and Janine being like, enough of you. And like, there was like, George goes big and goes home. Like, he's gonna say to Janine, like, we'll find a way out of it. She's like, I'm voting you out. So I have found a way. Look, he gave him a lot of sound bites to bury him, and they did. I still think, I did like his final words. He's done so much for the franchise that is not untrue. I think he did take it pretty global. I think maybe we're here though, maybe because of Russell, right? Like
Yeah.
they brought in Russell. Hard to think about that. Best not to. But yeah, they brought him. I mean, well, then it went so badly with Russell. If anything, Russell probably almost doomed this. And then they were gonna kind of get Boston Rob, has always been the rumor. And then they got Sandra. Maybe it's Sandra who did this, but whoever it was, there's been that thread there. But George has done a lot for the global recognition of the show. It was funny how he was like, I beat David. I
Yeah.
love George. Was it a great outing? Not his best, but he was very memorable.
Yeah, what did you make about the edit here? Because honestly, and there maybe were some nuances, he again is able to survive last tribal council. It really does seem like the edit was clowning on him a lot, to the point
He got a
where
go-to edit.
his
I was
shot
getting texts from people like, this is the first time I've ever watched. Brandon Dolan texted me. He's like, does George always get a dodo edit? I'm like, no,
that's what he asked me as well. And
yeah.
I mean, what I told him is like, especially in Brains versus Brawn, it was definitely there. It's just that we were sort of waiting, or at least we didn't realize in retrospect that like he would be able to pick up those tailwinds and fly his way into the final two. So I think that even in the moment, I'm like, we're pouring it on a little thick. Now, maybe part of it is because his opposition was David, who is also very hammy in confessionals. And so he's really saying like, this absolute moron, look what he's doing. But when your intro shot is you getting hit in the face with the Australian flag, like it definitely is going in on George more than it has in previous seasons. Now, granted, George was steering into the curve a bit, complete with the dad bod of it all, the budgie smugglers. I don't think production was pushing that onto him. But again, it's so interesting looking at this bizarro universe where like it's as if it was that Brains versus Brawn edit, but he's not able to gain momentum and make his way to the end in such a commanding fashion. It's more so like, yeah, he's one of these classic people who thinks they're out in front controlling everything, but they kind of bumble their way through a couple of tribal councils before getting voted off.
Yeah, it's 4 things, the 3 that you've said. Like, it does go badly, 1. He's leaning into it, and they're helping him do that, 2. He's against David, who's always going to be the golden god, who gets a glowing edit, even being first boot of this tribe. And to be fair, David did not do that badly at all.
Well, now we know in retrospect why that might have happened as well.
we can say that he's going to be the host of the show, which is not something I've technically known in recording the podcast before tonight. Yeah, so I think that's true. He's going against a future host of the show. So that actually shows how uneven that will be. And I mean, that also leads to the 4th thing, which is it's extreme because Australian Survivor will always be extreme. They're never going to pepper this stuff in. It's always going to be the most. So I do think for George, the year was kind of like it all kind of went wrong at the same time to get to that point. But I wouldn't want to go against the future host of the show and be on the edit of that. Like that is an agenda. But I do think also a lot of it was actually there, and then he was actually doing a lot of it.
Yeah. I will also say, sorry, before we move on to World, I do want to say as well that, David will obviously very publicly declare his retirement from Australian Survivor on the way out. I think George has the exact opposite mindset. Like this guy, I think very much he very much lives and breathes this type of stuff that I think he's going to come back any and every time that he wants to. So I think that, maybe we'll check in with each of these Aussies that are booted as to okay, what are their chances? What's their desire to come back and play again? I think George and David are on 2 very opposite sides of the spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree with that. I think, well, let's talk about Worlds. Firstly, I will give some credit to Parvati, some discredit to Tony, and then some discredit to me. I thought this was going better for Tony. I thought that the US people were more connected, and now we see it's like a full-on women's alliance. That's really bad for Tony. He's very much on the outs of this whole key hunt. That's a lot of their content in this episode,
which is wild, right? You think that Tony, the master of the scavenger hunt, ends up getting outbid here.
Yeah, which is unfortunate for the Tony stands, but Parv is doing what she does best, which is also great for the Parvati stands. This has been part of the season. It's I want Tony to find it, I want Parvati to find it. Parvati, I really loved her consolidating with the key. Forming a Black Widow brigade. That's so Parvati. Lisa was so cute here.
Can we talk about this? Why didn't we not think beforehand that this would not come to fruition? Obviously, I think the Lisa Sarik connection is something we manifested from the very beginning. But I think, specifically, when you called Cass Canadian Amanda Kimmel, and I saw the 3 of them together, it makes so much sense in my mind. It's so synonymous that they're well, listen, all we need is Amanda. This is Amanda from the Great White North. Let's just bring her in. And that, yes, I think Lisa is a part of this, but I think this really cemented this episode that these are the three, and I guess maybe
I don't know.
is Elisa a Natalie Bolton type?
I just feel like Lisa wasn't there when they found the key. She was the only one they went out of their way to tell when she hadn't been there. They make her a part of the plan. She's so cute in this moment. She's like, that's great. That's so good. Like, it's wonderful. Lisa, oh my God.
So
Lisa's
good.
just me if I was on the season, but so much nicer than me. It's so
That's
good.
another big prediction we made
yeah.
of like, oh yeah, Lisa's going to be the fan analog. I don't think we realized how much that label would
Analog.
be appropriate until these first 3 episodes.
Yeah, it's been so good, but I do think we did see this women's alliance happening. But the difference between Cass and Amanda Kimmel is Cass is like, I lost it one final tribal council. I'm not looking to do it again, and so she's learned from it, and she's not sharing the idol, which is like I don't really blame
Amanda
the
Kimmel
women
did the
for
same
that.
thing. At least she tells Parvati,
I think
but
she
that's
told
basically
Parv.
it.
Yeah, she told Parv. So, but I do think that I don't blame the women here. Like, it's not their fault that Cass was beaten unanimously. Like, she's trying to make a name for herself. I love that she's learned. It's the kind of thing where 2 things are found in this episode and they're used completely differently. And I really enjoy both. Like, it works for each game. Like, if Cass wants to keep it to herself and try and make a big individual move, which she needs to do because she's playing from behind, do it. Great. Like, you need to make a name for yourself, and it's not about making a group. Parvati's leading from the front, so she needs numbers, she needs protection, she needs to consolidate. And she does that so well with the idol. So they both do really well in these completely different approaches to finding the idol. That's kind of the thing where everyone's always like, it's a golden rule in Survivor. Like, never tell anyone. It's like, no, it's not a golden rule. It's situational. And it's literally differently situational on this beach in this episode on one tribe of 6 people because they come from different vantage points. And that just proves that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, not to peek too much into, seasons that are to come later in this year, but, I have been going over a bunch of my preseason interviews for Survivor 49, and something that I commonly ask people was like, if you find something, are you telling someone about it? And I think almost always what people said was like, on paper, no, but it can be used as a key piece of information to bridge a connection with your ally. When information is currency, yeah, exactly. It's in this case quite literally. But yeah, it's that like, you can operate independently, you could be a Rachel Lamont, but at the same time, like if you want to use this to sort of build a bridge with somebody, it's a very easy way to do so. And again, the fun irony of all this is that Tony starts the episode being like, we're going on a key hunt. Whoever finds it, open it in front of everybody. So we'll make this a tribe thing. Right? We'll make it a tribe thing. And, Suri and Parvati are like, Parvati in particular is like, listen, I saw what JT did in Heroes versus Villains. Like, we're not doing any tribe idol shit,
bad.
but it does serve as a communal power just for a smaller group within the tribe, right? It's not a thing for the tribe. It's going to be a thing for these 3 people in particular. And it leads to this incredible moment, this key cliffhanger going into a commercial break. I can't help it, Shannon. It's unlocked in my mind. But literally, this goes to show why I think public advantages are so much fun. Yes, it could definitely hamper gameplay sometimes to be like, okay, I know so-and-so has this thing. But like, even just the short-term adrenaline you get from like the birdcage idol, even from like the thing where you sneak away to someone else's camp and get something to get an idol, like there's just this inherent thrill that activates inside my reptile brain when there's this tense moment of like, oh my God, the box is unlocked and Tony is right there. Is he going to see? Parvati and Suri are sweating bullets right now. She's sitting on the box. That just activates something from a storytelling perspective where after Tony is able to leave, they like let out a collective sigh, as do we all, to be like, okay, lock up the box, open it up later, find out what it is. So it was such a fun sequence, and it winds up producing something that, if and when it gets activated, is also going to activate a Leo moment for Tony and Parvati. Shannon, at long last, Palesa's idol.
I know, and that there's so much here. Yeah, the Palesa idol. So Survivor South Africa lives. We lost Rob Bentley, but it was unfair, the Survivor South Africa franchise. I was like, oh, it's a bit upsetting if people won't go watch Survivor South Africa now because he lasted 1 episode. The Palesa idol, which Adam was talking about on Winners at War, that he thought that the Fleur-de-Lis was a podium idol, like Palesa had taken the podium idol in 2018 Survivor South Africa. He was calling it the Palesa idol in Confessionals. That did not make the edit for some reason. I don't know why that niche reference didn't make it, because he is the Lisa of Winners at War, and it wasn't an idol. But now, he's the Adam Lisa more than it's not Palesa. But anyway, the point is that it's here now. Luckily, Parvati has already shared it because she's going to have to do this very, very public thing. And that's a fun thing, right? Like, we liked it when Palessa did it. She did it cool as a cucumber.
Well, that's the fun thing too, is that because this is so public, now we are sort of going to get a Black Widow Brigade sequel in multiple ways. Not only with the composition of this women's alliance, but the fact that they're going to have to pull off some sort of heist, right? Now, granted, this can't be a sort of like behind the scenes heist. And yes, you love it bringing that chestnut back, because
Yeah, it's
obviously,
been years, but it's in
yeah,
my reptile brain.
but someone's going to have to stand up and obviously grab the podium, the idol from the podium. They can't necessarily do it surreptitiously, but there could still be fun elements involved where Suri and Cass and Lisa and Parvati as well. I mean, I don't know who's going to be able to grab this idol, and possession is 9/10 of the law. So I think that's going to be maybe a very interesting point here as to like who gets the idol and who keeps it. But whatever role they have to play, there is still, I think, a group mentality of this of like, all right, we have to kind of suss out when we can do this and if it is needed. To put it in Pandora's box is really intriguing to me, because this was something that was available to both tribes, right? And this is going back to Australian All-Stars, where you had Henry and you had Matt Rogers, going out to that buoy in the opening. And that idol that was also available at Tribal Council, granted it was sort of like hanging in the background instead of right up in front in the podium, could have been taken by either tribe. I think that's a very interesting concept, because I think we're so used to, separate but equal idols placed at each camp, and we
Yeah.
obviously still get those this season. This is more so a, hey, up for grabs with both tribes, to the point where part of me kind of wishes, as much as the box mechanic was fun, that this was information available to both tribes. And so now you have, especially in a double tribal council situation, like, who's going to grab the idol first from the podium?
Yeah, that is interesting. I do think it works from a structural perspective that they unlocked the key. At first I thought that Luke had an idol and then this tribe had the Palessa idol, which seemed
Mm,
really unfair.
right, yeah.
Because that's really tough. Like, he didn't even find a clue. Like, he just found the idol. And I was like, no, but you've won it. It shouldn't be tougher. It made more sense once Cass found their actual idol. Both beaches have an idol. It's fair. And they chose the box. Well, Rob chose the box over Flint, over a top, over all these other things. And
Isn't
they've
that, well,
unlocked this
can we just talk about that
opportunity.
irony as well, that Rob has first choice, picks the box, and as a result, he ends up bringing an idol from his own season into the game.
Well, not from his season, from his franchise. Yeah,
series, I should
to
say.
poverty. To
Yes.
poverty's, yeah. So there's a lot going on there. It's like the spirit of Survivor South Africa lived in the box in so many different ways. So yeah, that was great. But no, I think that this makes sense. But it could be just two idols, and then both could find a clue, and then whoever gets there first. And then whenever you have a tribal idol where that's true of them, it's like whoever goes to tribal council actually gets like a gain. So then you throw challenges, like that becomes an interesting thing. But
And
I do
also
think
just the image of the tribe that goes second, and you have someone walking up to the podium and like looking around for something and not finding it. Tell me that is not
yeah.
television gold. Come on.
I've seen it. I saw Adam do it, and then you say worth a
Yeah.
shot. It wasn't anything, guys. And they must just did the exact same thing.
Yeah, but
I think,
it's either that, it's like a combination of that and the Jason Siska effing stick, where it's like, okay, I couldn't find it, so therefore somebody on the other tribe has the idol.
yeah, but this is fine. Don't hide any more idols. This is fine. This has been a
Yes.
fine.
We
For
have
14
three.
people starting off, yeah, that's enough. We're done.
3 out of
Done.
11 right now. I mean, maybe they're hoping that, they expend one, but again, with only one vote seemingly until the merge on each tribe, there's a chance we might hang on to them. Now, I guess the downside of having such a public idol is that when somebody grabs it, everyone's going to know. Even if it's at like a pre-merge tribal, that information is going to be communicated to the other tribe. And so maybe they feel like, okay, that'll be an easy way to like flush that idol early on. But yeah, I mean, just to reset the board a bit, we have Luke, very private idol. Even his closest ally doesn't know about it. Cass, very private idol. Even if her closest ally doesn't know about it. Imagine if they recruit Cass to grab the idol from the podium. That would be
She'd
absolutely
be
incredible.
powerful. Cass found out a night on her own season, and yeah, she was pretty powerful. But as she said, she's got to take the killer shot now. I know that I like that she knows to do that.
Yeah.
So, what are your predictions? So, because they're going to a double tribal, I feel like that puts them at 9. So they'll
Yeah.
definitely merge after that, right? Like,
I
this
would
isn't Survivor
imagine so, yeah.
Finland where we're accidentally merging at 8. I think
Yeah,
that's what they did.
so then
Yeah.
my hope would be final 2 and 7-person jury, but I don't know if the days work
But
out.
that's
Because
gonna
we're
be
already,
hard, and
yeah, because we're already
and
on
and
day
episodes.
6, I think.
Days and episodes make that impossible
Yeah,
unless it's
which
another double boot. Like the
Yeah,
exact like this.
which I hope not. Like, if we're doing a double boot, if we have to do a double boot. I'm so glad it happens pre-merge. I hate when we do it post-merge because it involves some sort of
No,
convoluted
but we're
concept.
losing them.
I know, but we're gonna lose him no matter what.
No, I want him longer.
But I do think that, I mean, maybe there's a chance that we get sort of like what we occasionally get on Survivor US, which is like the second. Oh, well, it's sort of like what we get in the new era with that split tribal council, right? Where like the
No,
tribe that
that's
goes
terrible.
second gets someone on the jury, and we get like a jury of 7 with a final 3.
Right.
I mean, we could
Yeah,
do a
that
jury of
makes
8.
sense.
Everyone who's in the game right now could have made the jury for all we know.
I think everyone on the whole freaking season should have made the jury. I thought they were gonna say to Rob Bentley, like, stick around, like, make every legend stay on the. I wanted that.
See, I disagree.
And
I
I
think the
hate
concept
big juries, but this is a historic season.
the concept on paper is fun. I don't like the idea of like, well, I've never interacted with you, but I'm going to try to vote for you to win.
I hate that usually, but I'll make an exception for the history.
So looking at the world, because I think
wait, but why do you hate the post-merge doubles instead of the pre-merge?
Because it always involves some sort of like, aha, but tonight there's a twist. We're voting again.
Oh, right,
so
that's true.
like,
Yeah,
it always involves some sort of thing, as opposed to this is a very easy concept of like, okay, you have a chance at individual immunity. Both tribes are going. I think that's the simplest way to do it. And I think if anything, these first 3 episodes are teaching us like the concept of let the players play. But, you know, you and I think, have sort of settled on maybe Kirby, maybe Shaunie is the one most in trouble for Australia. I think World, and unfortunately also settles upon 2 very specific people. I think we are losing one of the T's here, Shannon. Testosterone and Tony/Tommy.
Yes, which would be crazy because there'd be 2 men left after 4 episodes, which would be the season a lot of Twitter, to be fair, has probably wanted in their mind. I think I'm concerned for Tony that a lot of the things that were keeping him protected will be done because they'll assume there's a merge, so they don't need him physically anymore. And he's been really trying in the challenges. And then also, like, if the US, like, if from a US perspective, they wanted to kind of keep that strong and really protect him, they might be like, well, we're definitely merging next. And he's not a priority. We said we keep him good to merge, but we're about to merge. And the girls are what we're actually doing. So I am concerned. It becomes down to what group wants to protect their guy more in terms of Tony and Tommy. And I don't know that Parv and Sari like really want to keep Tony at the point where it's like the first pre-merge vote, but like say it ain't so. I refuse. I will not.
I know it would be awful, especially because to your point, like Tony's had some very fun antics. Of course, like the clip of, you know, him very glibly approaching Suri and Parvati, who just go, it's Rob, and him walking away has already, you know, made its way around the internet. But as Tony talks about in this episode, he's very much playing this first stage Winners of War game of like trying to lie low, not wanting to stick out too much, maybe hoping that like, you know, things look grim, but maybe he can throw Tommy to the wolves, ironically enough, should they go next time. But I think you make a lot of really solid points that I think, again, if this entire pre-merge has been about big game hunting, he obviously is a much bigger target than Tommy. I don't think he's necessarily a shield for Suri and Parvati, especially given the group that they already have. I think especially if they're going for this very public idol, they could feel like that's information that Tony is going to communicate to other people and could be incredibly dangerous. And I mean, also from a meta perspective, we haven't seen anything from Tommy. You know, like when you look at like the Rob Bentley edit from episode 1, you're like, okay, this makes a lot of sense in retrospect because this is going to be his big flame out episode. You want to milk as much out of that as possible. Like if Tommy were to go in the next episode, that would maybe feel like the really first big miss of Australia versus the world, where like, I don't know, like in general with the editing, Australian Survivor editing is always kind of a ticky-tack thing. You know, we have been, despite being hour-and-a-half long episodes and having only 14 people in the game, they have largely stuck to the formula of like, hey, if you're not going to Tribal Council, you're not going to be seen in the second half of the episode. And it does kind of suck at the disservice of someone like Tommy and up to this episode Cass, who have like largely not been shown at all or given any sort of perspective. So part of me is also kind of reading between the lines and is like, is the reason why we're getting so much Tony content not just because of the name and reputation that he brings, but because like we know we're going to lose him soon, and so let's get as much out of him as possible.
Yeah, I don't feel good about Shaunie. I think it's Shaunie or Tony or maybe Tommy. I kind of, yeah, which is weird because all the names are so similar to each other. But I kind of think Shaunie or Tony, which is, it's funny because at the beginning of this podcast, I was like, you're bound to lose legends. You're still left with legends. Let's try be positive. And now I'm like, I quit the season. I quit the podcast. I'm out. So
go out on top. We'll always have these first 3 episodes.
pull a rabbit out of the hat because it's not looking good and it's double tribal. And even though you've made great points about why they make this ends in a pre-merge, and it's probably the perfect spot to put it then at the end of the pre-merge, I'm still mad about it.
Not to
Because I
mention
want
as
them to
well,
stay
like
around to build Lego.
as was acknowledged in this episode, like Australia is already kind of losing numbers at this point. And granted, they'll still be down in numbers entering the merge, but this at least allows World to have to get a little bit more blood on their hands right before the merge, right? How many times have we seen like a tribe goes to tribal council in its first
That's
episode,
fair.
doesn't go back for the rest of the pre-merge and comes in completely united? It does seem like, if World kept winning, they would still come into the merge as a very united block. This could be an opportunity to potentially form some cracks there where Australians are not necessarily just going to be lambs to the slaughter.
Yeah, it extends the pre-merge and makes them actually have to play more of the game. You've made really good points, and I'm so mad about it because I want to be unjustifiably angry about it, even though it makes a lot of sense. Anyway, that's fine. I'll find something else to be mad about. Let's do the Chisy. Take it away, Jacob Sager Weinstein and MC Color.
1, 2, 3. 1, 3. It's getting kind of Chisy. 3, 2, 1.
There were a lot of good options.
Yeah.
I thought in this episode. Do you want to go first, or should I go first?
Ooh,
or what are we doing?
I will go first because I think my picks will diverge a little bit from yours based on the discussion we had in the first like 2/3 of this podcast. I'll work my way up here. I will give 1 point to Cass. Now, it's very rare that we give points to, the tribe that doesn't attend tribal council, especially one that had such complicated strategy as this one. But the fact of the matter is, she found an idol. And as you talked about, she has the wherewithal to know that she's going to keep this quiet. She seems to show, at least on paper, some motivation to change her game, which I know was your primary worry about coming into this season for her. Was like, she's a great all-around player. Her fatal flaw is that she's too loyal. And now she's able to actually acknowledge that. So I think she's in an incredibly good position here. So I will give her 1 point. I am going to give... Oh, this is tough. I will give 2 points to... I'll give 2 points to Luke. Because I think that Luke was somebody who, as you teased before, through little maneuvers, was able to help exploit the crack. Was able to help save himself, was able to save Janine, and then also I think shore him and Janine up. Now, not to like besmirch Janine whatsoever, I'm going to give her an honorable mention, but I think that he was at least personified as the one that was able to leverage these relationships, was able to, keep this idol information a secret and be able to like really try to work with and against George to help take advantage of the situation that was being placed in front of them, also due to his own actions. This might be controversial given the fact that you are teasing her up as a next boot. I really think it's going to be Kirby over Shaunie, so I will give Shaunie the 3. I personally think it's logically sound to have her get rid of George for the reasons I described before. I don't think she's in direct danger over somebody like Kirby. And I think the fact that, much like I imagine you lauded Kirby in the David vote in episode 2, the fact of the matter is, Shaunie walked into this episode with like a plan of, hey, I want to get rid of George, and was able to utilize a lot of the elements that she had and partially what George was able to do in terms of self-sabotaging to make this thing work. And so, again, I tend to use this to acknowledge the moves that people make in the episode rather than maybe long-term planning. And so I want to give her her flowers for the fact that she has now been able to take out Arya Stark style both of her enemies from her previous seasons.
Yeah, I mean, look, I love all these players. I want to give them all Chisy points. I feel like for me, Shaunie is in a hard spot here in like who to keep around based on like the reality of Sarah coming for her. That blind spot worries me. Her being split on in her own plan and not even being in like the talks of the 4 of them that they were having also concerns me. Like, she was driving it in name, which does add to an already extensive reputation, but I actually don't know that I give her as much of the credit, and I'm not as high on it for her. Although, like, you would think always taking out George makes sense, but yeah, it's kind of hard when there are things that might be even more worrying than George for her. Kirby's very powerful. She makes a decision, but again, puts herself in a tough spot. It's a tweener. Like, it's, she has to keep Shaunie, but like there are issues with keeping Shaunie. And I think that also it's coming home to roost in terms of the ungraceful social pushing that we were worried about before. So that makes it tough. I'm really glad that you gave Cass a point. I'll give her an honorable mention because I think that was great, as I described. Sarah has the right idea, but she can't pull it off in terms of the capital, so I can't give it to her. I will give 3 points to Luke. He kept his idol. He's in a great spot here. He got out an enemy who was not treating him very nicely. I think he and Janine went from the bottom to the top. I will give Janine 2 points. But the reason I'm going Luke over Janine is, again, I think that he really stoked those flames in a great way. Yeah, like without that info, Shaunie really shouldn't go for George. Like without the info that George was going to vote for Shaunie, which Shaunie is correctly reading that Luke's telling the truth on, then I was between her voting, for George anyway. Like then she's, I feel like, really making the wrong decision. But she has the right read to trust Luke, and George was going for Shaunie, which makes that a better move. And I think Luke's doing a lot of that, and he's kept his idol through this as well. So I'm giving him 3, Janine 2. I'll give a little bit of love to Parvati on the 1. I've been giving love to Tony at the bottom, and he's doing worse than I thought. Parvati's doing really, really well. Finding the key, using it to consolidate another Black Widow brigade. You know how far back this is going to set women's alliances? We've been dealing with it for decades. Women won't even be allowed to look at each other.
Now, to be fair, maybe American survivors, the diehards that they are, the ones that are cast on these New Era seasons, will have seen this and will take action against it. Good news is the people that are usually cast on Australian Survivor have not seen previous seasons, so they'll be like, and as we're talking, as was recently announced, the next season is currently filming, so they have no idea this is happening at all.
Well, the new era, they were probably spoiled. The new era but they're fine. But like the new era is screwed, okay? Women's alliances were set back in 2008. This is like if Rob and Amber were to come back on the show and then just fall in love again, renew their vows, get to the end again. How did you let this happen? And then the power duos are done again. So that's what we've done with women's alliances. Parvati, it works for you, and then for decades, no one else.
We needed a bit of a refresh. People say that we're living in a reboot revival culture, and so I will say the reboot of Black Widow Brigade looks a little different, but I'm here for the changes that are made.
This is Blacker Widower Brigader, like right this for Year Friday. Wonderful film, by the way. That was better than it should have been. It was so good. Okay, so those are the points. What else, Mike? Do you have stuff to plug?
How are you looking right now after the first week in terms of Chisy points?
It's a question for another day when I know that. We'll do another podcast. I don't get the charts. I don't know.
Rob, yeah.
We Kirby got a bunch. What was happening in the first episode? So Ree got 6.
Okay.
Lisa got 3. It'll be worked out in the charts. Tune in to my show with Rob. Wonderful plugging that. Yeah.
Which is good, because I think that, then it seems like the leaders in the clubhouse kind of coming out this week sound like, a Suri, Luke.
It's very varied.
It's very varied, which is good, because again, especially from an Australian Survivor perspective, we tend to kind of focus the story and strategic power over a few select players, even within the first week. Doesn't seem to be the case here. And even if we feel like the boots are lined up, primed to go in this next episode, I think this season it is far from over. We still have 7 episodes, but at the same time, I think even from like a competitive perspective, especially given the theming that has emerged in these first few episodes of like getting rid of the big targets, that makes things a bit more dangerous for even the leader in the clubhouse with these types of things. So it has just been such an amazing start to this season that makes me so freaking elated to be a fan of this franchise. Like what an incredible celebration of what this show has brought into our lives over the past quarter of a century. It has been nothing but incredible to watch these people get to interact with each other, as is the case usually when we start these all-star seasons. Dare I say, this is one of the strongest starts to an all-star season maybe we've ever had. Like even Heroes versus Villains had a couple of like pretty, straightforward rote votes in the beginning. I might say Australia versus the World came out to a hotter start than Heroes versus Villains, often regarded as the greatest returning season of all time.
That's surpassing even the biggest expectations. But Mike, it's your birthday in Australia right now. We passed over your birthday.
Yeah, it'll be my birthday and my birthday in the rest of the world by the time this comes out.
In both Australia and America.
It'll be, this is my Australia birthday, and now when it comes out, it'll be my world birthday.
Yeah, and that's perfect.
Can we use that term now? Happy Australian birthday and happy world birthday.
Happy world birthday. That's what it is for me, by the way. No, thank you for being the best person alive.
Thank you. I mean, listen, I will say the same to you. I'm incredibly honored, and thank you for bringing me back on as a recap bitch. This has been such a cool thing. Thank you to everyone on Australia versus the World for giving me such an incredible gift to salivate over for the past few days, and hopefully more to come. We're a 1/3 of the way through a 10-course meal right now, and I'm not full. I'm not getting full anytime soon.
Yeah, well, I've had a gift. I wanted to thank the listeners. I came into the season 1 day ago. It started 1 calendar day ago for me.
One
It took
Australia day.
I've lived lives, and yes. No, but I genuinely came into the season feeling like really down on myself
Hmm.
yesterday. But it's been a big day. I was really doubting myself. I felt very invalidated by certain clear public things. And also the season is so big. Like everyone's
Yeah.
talking about it, everyone's watching it, everyone's
Yeah.
podcasting about it, everyone's making content. And I was like, who am I? You know, like what are we doing? Does anyone care about this? And I felt like so irrelevant. And I'm like, is this content doing anything for anyone? And then
Mm.
today I saw that we were number 3 on the charts in all of Australian TV and film. You know, I saw the numbers were great on YouTube. I'm probably going to look into what the numbers are generally, which I don't usually do, but it just meant so much to me. So thank you to the listeners for restoring my faith a little bit when I was being a bit upset about it, just in my own head about it. And thank you for choosing to be with us, because there are
Yeah.
options, to be honest. And if you're
Yeah.
choosing to experience this historic season with us, we greatly appreciate you. I greatly appreciate you. It means more than you could ever know. And I just want to thank the listeners for a great first week
They
so
say
far.
usually
Is
when
what
a
we've done.
plane lands, you can choose any flight you want to. So we're happy you chose our airline, and I think ironic given the fact that RHAP is now available on American Airlines, but it is incredibly, you know, gratitude filled to be able to serve as any sort of like modicum of coverage for what people checked out around this historic season, and it all lays at your feet, Shannon. I think that you deserve every single accolade that you receive, considering the amount of investment you have had in the season already, all the work you put in to get into it. I think it has paid off in dividends, considering all the incredible stuff we've seen so far is so much, subsidized and, held up by all the great stuff you did filling us in about these players, either reminding us or giving us a bunch of new information about some of these people coming in, where it gives us so much needed context to break down this fantastic season even further. So I think you deserve all the credit in the world for what you have done in the past for Australian Survivor, what you have done for this season, and what you will continue to do. We are, again, that's why the Salisa Suri comparison is very much, reversed back to you, is that I am so happy to have you not only in my life, but getting to helm all of this truly once in a lifetime coverage of this once in a lifetime season.
Damn, Mike, it's your birthday. Like, I don't know. Like, I hope my birthday card really didn't get lost in the mail, because I sent it on express post. Like, it should really. But I love you the most.
I love you.
Out of anyone. Anyway, thank you. We have many things. We have a Rob Bentley X interview that's already up. We will have a George X interview. We did not get a David X interview, and I think it's fair. David is the host of the show. They announced it. We're gonna do a reality flash right after this.
Yeah,
It
should be
out.
It should be out by the time that you're listening
Definitely.
to this. Shannon and I are going to break down the news that was officially released by Channel 10 following David's boot, that he will be the next host of Australian Survivor after rampant speculation. So if you want a little bit more information as to what that means, David's previous experience hosting reality TV, check that out, therealityflash.com.
Yep. So that will be out. So then we've got all 3 of these recaps are out. We have the show with Rob. That's coming up as well. Follow me at Shannon Gates on Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, WeKnowGlobalSurvivor.com for all of that so that you don't miss it. I hear that it's in the top 3 on the Apple Podcast charts. So the recap was. So thank you so much for all of that. The Chisy raffle, which has been out for 1 day, has raised $350 the last time I checked. So we're doing well on the Chisy raffle. If you want to enter that, I've posted about that as well. It's 10 Australian dollars for 1 ticket, 25 for 3 tickets to help some cats and really do something very good with this community, and either steal my finale points or the Recap Bitches finale points. So Mike, you got to donate so you can get all the points.
That feels a little like entering your own raffle, Like it feels like it's going to a great cause, but at the same time, it feels a little bit against the spirit of the game.
I entered already. And my mom's going to enter, and she said that if she wins, she wants to give Chisy points.
I see. Listen, I would love that.
That would be great.
How much do you think she would be able to work with your suggestions versus her saying, no, mother knows best, I'm giving my own points?
She would be she wouldn't listen to me. She would have her own things, and they would not be strategy related. it would just be like, I just love her. I just love him. And he's so nice.
I mean,
Or,
listen,
you know, like,
if you want to give points to Jonathan LaPaglia on his way out the
she
door,
would. She would
could do
give
so.
all 6 of her. I don't think you can. You can do it. You can if you want.
I'm
Oh,
so
now they're
again,
all gonna do that.
that might be the main appeal to a lot of people here. JLP deserves his points. This is the way you can do so, people.
My mom would give all her points to Jonathan LaPaglia. That is true. It would be mostly on a hotness scale, and I'm saying that about my mom, and it's simply quite true. It's just how she would give her chili points. We talked about this when we watched Freakier Friday. We were like, what would change about our lives? I'm like, you could do my job. My job's easy if we swap bodies. And she was like, I'm like, but it would be a lot of just like thirsting over JLP in the podcast. That's how you'd know. Just know. If I'm ever like overly thirsting over JLP, I'm accidentally my mom. I'm just saying it now.
I'm thanking
How
you
did
for
we get
giving up
here?
a signal that you're
Yeah.
Freaky Friday with your mom, that this is the red flag you're sending up.
There will be signs. Mike, do you have things to plug?
Yeah, so we talked about the upcoming news that's coming, or should I say news that has already passed on the Reality Flash. Also did a couple of reality flashes this past week. One about the cast of The Amazing Race that was released this past week for this fall season that will feature all Big Brother contestants. I also did one about the Traders US announcing a new civilian-only version that will be coming in addition to the celebrity version in the fall. Speaking of Big Brother, I'm covering that from a season 27 perspective, doing weekly exit press, and as I mentioned before, Survivor 49, we are approaching about a month until the season premieres. And so whenever that cast releases, you know I have a butt ton of content coming your way in the form of preseason interviews and much more. But other than that, random musings at a Mike Bloom type.
Wonderful. Well, I love you, Mike. I love you all. Thank you guys for a fun week of recaps.
I'm blowing you a kiss because my hands are free.
Yeah, my cat, my hands. This has been great. This is so fun. And thank you all. Thank you to our team behind the scenes. And I will see you next time. Bye.
This is RHAP. We know reality TV.